Hey there everybody, and welcome to a brand new LP for an often forgotten cult classic for the Sega Saturn known by the name of Enemy Zero, or E-Zero, I think it was also called in Japan. It's an interesting blend of adventure and FPS action bits, along with Kenji Eno's very unique ideas regarding digital actresses and actors, but I'll get into that soon enough. We're going to go ahead and start the opening movie here. But I am going to keep talking over it, mostly due to the fact there's not really any spoken dialogue in it, even though there is a lovely score by a man named Michael Nyman, I think it's pronounced. Did the score for the Academy Award winning The Piano, and also for the television series Battlestar Galactica. Does a very good job for any of the music he does in this game, even though, well, we'll be seeing soon enough that the music is kind of infrequent throughout the game. But I guess I should go into a little bit about Enemy Zero itself, considering it is like I said, a unique title, much like pretty much everything that Warp Development Studios put out. Now, Warp is mostly known as the brainchild of Kenji Eno, very auteur game designer, known mostly for the D series of games. Enemy Zero came out, I think, a little bit, maybe a year or two after D1. Has some similarities. It does keep the same idea of digital actors and actresses that he originally tried to bring up in D. But it does go somewhat of a more coherent route in regards to story and gameplay elements. We're not going to be fighting Dracula or delving into the weird dream state that was D. No, the plot of Enemy Zero is, well, kind of generic and bland, and not to spoil too much, but it's pretty much the plot of Aliens. But for right now, we're getting a bizarre mixture of, I can only assume, are weapon-based images and atrocities that man has committed against man. There's a lot of mild symbolism in this game, especially when you consider the shape of the ship that we are on, as it slowly zooms into view here. Seems kind of like it's in the shape of a human heart. And for those that, might have seen a little bit of D and D2, Kenji Eno really loved his symbolism. But yeah, the ship here, the Aki, is going to be our main location for the course of the game. And something of a carrier spaceship that's heading on its way back to Earth. Thing is that in much the same style as I said, Aliens, something goes amiss. just like that, whatever dangerous cargo that the ship was carrying has now managed to break loose of its bonds. And we see one of the main gimmicks of Enemy Zero. Yep, you did miss it. The enemy was invisible. But I assume due to that breaching door, that's what's caused our heroine here, Laura. Yep, it's the same digital actress as from D1 and later from D2, has been awoken from her cryosleep, and through a number of classic horror POV shots, well, you can naturally assume that she's going to have to deal with them at some point in the future. Well, that's not before we get some tasteful naked shots of her, for reasons. Indeed, we are reminded that we are playing a horror game. Yeah, while D1 was somewhat light on the gore factor, I think there were a few gruesome scenes earlier on, Enemy Zero has no qualms with just busting out the gore early on and as heavily as possible. But with seeing her comrade struck down by some invisible menace, Laura now feels it's time to put on some clothes and go out there and face the day. And that puts us directly into our first bit of real gameplay after we situate ourselves and make sure our hair isn't too mussed and fussed. But yeah, welcome to real gameplay. Pretty smooth transition there, but initially we find ourselves in a situation very much akin to D1 in that we are locked into very specific camera views in a very adventure-esque situation, or a very adventure-esque gameplay setting, I suppose. We don't have too many options of ways to go. We are locked into specific locations around rooms to move to. But for the most part, most of them are important for us to investigate. Now, we don't need to make ourselves beautiful. There's just something hidden here. Now, how are you supposed to know that something was there? Well, the game kind of assumes that you're just going to be poking and prodding through every location you're given, and well, if you're wondering what this is, that's definitely a good question. The game won't be telling you directly. You're going to have to find out yourself. But the good news is we will be finding out soon enough, but we do have a few other items to pick up hidden around the room here. We check through some of these drawers in this futuristic little cabinet. We find what appears to be a spectrometer or Possibly something a Ghostbuster would use. And in addition to that, we find just another completely foreign looking object. Might be a futuristic floppy disk for all we know right now. But what I brought up before is our inventory screen. Allows us to select items, but doesn't give us any more information. We can merely look at a close-up picture of the item. But we will, like I said, be finding out soon enough what all these different items do. Really, we just have one more point of interest before we leave Laura's room. And it's going to be that computer that we saw her interacting with and making a video phone call before to, I think, Parker was his name, or I think due to the Japanese they replaced the R with an L, as they are oft wont to do. But there will be these computers located all around the ship. They'll have these same three options. We're just going to go ahead and go through them pretty quickly right now, such as the Videophone option. Now, the Videophone will give us a list of all available crew members in the rooms who we can call up and try to have conversations with. So let's try Kimberly first. Oh, it's asking for an access code. Currently, though, we have no access code. And we could try to enter random numbers, but well, it just won't work. It's going to have to be something we find out later. The good news is these other people we can call don't require codes, but they do have other problems. Such as the dreaded network error number 27. And, well, we already saw what happened to Parker, though if you were curious, we could have another quick look. The incredibly gruesome scene that's going on in his room. Also, rather confusing thing that happens at the end of every one of these Videophone videos. It just kind of locks up. Doesn't close the window, and well, the first time I was playing this, I actually thought the game had crashed. Now, in this second row, there's no reason to call David or George. They'll just refuse your call, but if we call up Ronnie, he's got some interesting information.
Laura, have you attempted going to the locker room? Your key should open the door. Go check it out.
Yeah, Ronnie's got plenty of helpful information. They already told us about the locker room and using our key, but do we have a key? Is it one of those items that we picked up? Well, we'll be finding out using one of these three options. Maybe it's information. But nope, information is not too helpful for the most part. It shows us the ship and that we're on our way back to Earth. Most importantly, though, it has access to maps. Now, there is no auto map function in the game. The only way to tell the layout of a floor is if the game decides to bestow upon us a map. Now, this may not seem too difficult, but if you look at that basement 1 floor, yeah, it's going to be getting a little bit complicated, and, well, the game isn't going to be handing out maps constantly, so occasionally you're going to have to figure out your way around via magic. Also, we have a lock option here. The thing is, from Laura's computer, there's really not anything we can do with this. It does at least tell us that there are 4 different towers named after seasons for reasons. Sure, yet again, something symbolic is probably behind it. Probably about the cycle of life or something like that. But that just leaves one final option, which is the database. Which, even though it doesn't seem like it, is probably the first place you're wanting to go when it's your first time playing. Especially the database here, full of Well, for lack of a better word, it's full of everything you're ever going to interact with in the game, even though some of the things might seem kind of obvious. Like, well, everybody knows what an elevator is and what a key card is, what cameras are. Some of the things, though, are actually super helpful, especially in giving you some idea about what you're going to have to deal with in the future. But as we scroll through, if you do pay attention, oh, yeah, we apparently have picked up a personal e-card. I assume that's what Ronnie was referring to open up the locker room area. We can also see here a quick description of the ship itself. It mentions an Ichiro Aki. Do not think that's an actual person. I think it's just a made-up name, but we also find out here that other item we got is... it's our saving device. Yeah, I'll be getting into the saving mechanic a bit later on, but this is our final item that we picked up, the VPS, or Vex Positioning System. This is going to be our way of dealing with identifying where those invisible enemies are, because we are never going to be able to see the enemy straight on. Also, we see these two corrupted files here at the bottom. I don't know if possibly it's a reference to Alien or some inside joke at Warp. But yeah, as far as I know, they do not do anything. Finally, there's some crew data here. Doesn't really give us too much important information. We can look at a picture of each crew member. There's either age and blood type and position on the ship. But yeah, for the most part, it's utterly useless unless you're Japanese and you just really need to know things blood type. But there's nothing in Laura's personal files, so we're just going to ignore that for right now. And hopefully enjoy all these menus because, well, due to some oddity of game design, they decided to make them completely unskippable. That's right, every cutscene in this game you have to watch in its entirety. But with that all out of the way, there's one last odd thing to investigate. We need to stop and smell the roses. To trigger a holographic butterfly. Symbolism! But yeah. So now we can safely leave Laura's room. We have some vague idea about where we need to go, and it's time to be introduced to the second half of the gameplay in Enemy Zero.
Attention. Attention. This ship's emergency mode has now been activated.
Yeah, we now find ourselves in the first person section. Our free control is now brought over Laura. We can look, well, 360 degrees. We can look up and down if we need to. But, you know, this doesn't look so bad. Though as we start to head around, you might notice there's not much in the way of variety or any kind of identical things with any of these hallways. But as we enter this room, it may seem initially like there isn't too much to it. Maybe there's something in a box over there, or... yeah, there's actually very lots of nothing in this room. The only thing we want to interact with is this computer over here in the corner. Especially as we see that Laura has just a subtle touch with computers. And we are greeted with a very similar layout from the computer we saw in Laura's room, but even though it looks the same, this computer has one key difference. And that is, if we go back to the lock screen under Information, we'll now see that, for some reason or another, on the Winter Tower, we can now control some of the locks. Now, it may not seem like a good idea with an evil alien force on the loose to unlock everything, but, well, we kind of have to, even though it might not seem like we should at this point. Otherwise, though, that is all we needed to do in here. I guess if we wanted to wait to figure out, why we needed to unlock that, we could, but I do want to cut out some of the unnecessary backtracking that this game decides to throw at you, and boy, does it decide to do that. I will say that for whatever Kenji Eno tried to do with innovation in regards to video games, he fell into a lot of unnecessary trappings and just shortfalls of video games, not only of the time, but also of the present day, such as unnecessary backtracking and padding. This game is honestly filled to the brim with it, and I am going to try to circumvent that as much as possible. But I do want to at least give you guys some impression about how this game plays out, with all of its samey corridors. We do want to ignore that room over there, leading to Mercus's room for right now. We won't be able to get in there just yet, but we will be exploring everywhere on this floor. But as Ronnie pointed out, we do have a key card to open up a locker, and the locker room is right over here. And outside of the lockers themselves, the locker room has one other important thing, which you can see on the wall there. It says charge system, and due to our own natural curiosity, we can check it out. Though in Laura's usual befuddled fashion, she has no idea what to do with it. Apparently, at this point of the game, she is something of an amnesiac. I guess that's how the game wants to pull it across, but it seems mostly like she has absolutely no idea what she's doing ever. But the good news is that I know what that's for, and we will be finding out later, but for right now, we want to go ahead and get inside the locker. And just for shits and giggles, I'm going to go ahead and show off the little animation for not using the card. Mostly because it's just so oddly sensual. Yeah. Yeah, Laura is confused yet again and gives no indication as to what you're supposed to do, but the good news is we don't have too many items to fuddle around with right now, and we know this is a E card, so we can go ahead and use it. And whenever you do something right, you are greeted by the screech of an eagle, which I think was also something carried over from both D and D2. But for our troubles of using that card, our reward... Hooray! It's another card. Yep, we used a key to get a key. Also, as far as I know, this personal E-card is the only one we'll ever be seeing, but it won't be the last locker that we'll be opening. Seems that for some reason or other, this ship uses a lot of priority keys. It's a bit confusing, and I can only assume it's why Kenji Eno never crafted a spaceship before he died. But, well, we already know that Mercus's room is locked, and the only other thing is this door down here in the elevator, and, well, not to spoil it, but the elevator is currently powered down, so process of elimination tells us that, well, we're going to have to use that key for something in here. Maybe it's something to do with that weird, messy texture on the wall there. As we get closer to it, it's clearly, well, looking at the buttons, it clearly looks like a calculator layout, as I can see a multiplication and division and clear symbol, but yeah, calculator aside, it's actually a keypad where we need to use that key we just picked up. And Inside, we're greeted by a pretty claustrophobic room. Not sure who thought it was a good idea to greet the player with a little bar right in their face in a very tiny room, but well, the good news is we don't have to stay in here for too long. Yeah, if you're wondering in these locked camera locations if there's some better way to tell just what the hell is going on, nope. The camera is locked into place and you can only hope that maybe as the camera shifts around you can get a better look, but that's not always going to be the case and it becomes kind of frustrating. But here we find ourselves with a lovely new palette texture, even though it's very short-lived, and yeah, it's definitely not the loveliest place, but it is the basement. Can't expect too much. But if we recall off the map we looked at earlier, there's pretty much only two locations down in the basement. First being this power room here. And as I know through my own psychic powers that the elevator is powered down, that does mean we have to power up this single generator that is currently powered down using our Hand of God. Question is, what's the puzzle here? I mean, you can press all these buttons and press the power button and nothing will happen. The actual solution is a combination of three of these buttons. Which three buttons? It's all trial and error. You're not given any other hint, you're not giving any indication about how many buttons you have to press, but the good news is it's not randomized, so once you get it once, you know the solution every time. There we go, we have solved bullshit problem number 1. Yeah, trial and error is honestly not a good puzzle mechanic. It never is, especially in this case where you have up to 30 different combinations, and that's assuming you have somehow figured out that you only need to press 3 buttons. So I do not know who thought that was a good idea, but I'm going to say Kenji Eno. But with the elevator now powered on, you might feel inclined to immediately rush up to the elevator, but you do not want to do that. I mean, since we did manage to unlock the shutters down here on that computer upstairs, I guess we might as well go ahead and explore down here and maybe make our way over to Parker's room. But you always want to be a little careful when the game gives you big, wide open areas like these. Usually that's a good indication that something bad is going to happen. And in this case, the bad thing is accompanied by horrible beeping. Yeah, that horrible beeping you hear is that VPS in VPS in our ear, signaling that an enemy is somewhere nearby. I'll explain a little bit more about this radar mechanic later on. For right now, though, we have no means to defend ourselves, and if an enemy does catch us, it's a one-hit kill, which is very, very bad. So let's go ahead and duck into Parker's room. So even though we did manage to see how Parker died in the intro cutscene and managed to call his room ahead of time, Laura is still taken aback at the grisly scene that's waiting for her inside, and I suppose that is pretty understandable. It It's honestly pretty gruesome for a console game. Overall, though, there isn't too much waiting for us down here in Parker's room. He's got some kickin' anime babe posters on the wall over there. But really, there's only one thing we want in here. It's going to be hidden over in this set of drawers underneath his sweet SW hat? I'm a big fan of Southwest too. Yeah, for our troubles, we do get the phone number to finally call up Kimberly. I'm sure that will be just the linchpin in figuring out just what the hell is going on, so we should go ahead and make that call as quickly as possible. No, it's the dreaded network error 27 again. Hopefully it hasn't consumed Kimberly. But yeah, that was an utter waste of time for the most part, but I don't know, maybe Ronnie has something interesting to say.
Laura, sensors are detecting a life force on level 1. It's not human, it's something else. Proceed with caution and go investigate.
Yeah, it seems that for some reason, I think whenever we turned on the power to the elevator, it caused one of these invisible alien-type creatures to spawn up on the first floor. And as far as I'm aware, I do think you have to call Kimberly to trigger something else, but I think on future playthroughs her phone number never changes, so well, you never have to technically ever come down to Parker's room as far as I know. Which is probably for the best because, well, it's kind of a death trap down here, more or less. But before we head back out to inevitably die, I guess it would be a good time as ever to explain the saving mechanic of the game. Yeah, we got this this voice recorder before, and the description mentioned something about a limited battery. We see here that it has 64 charges on the battery, which initially seems like quite a bit. But if we do go ahead and record here, goes through the normal confirmations and selection of saving slots. The thing is that it doesn't tell you the rather dastardly thing behind the whole saving mechanic, which is that every time you save, it's going to take up 3 charges off the battery. That's right, you only have a very limited amount of saves. Might not seem like too much, but if you're one to save fairly often, and in a game where you die in one hit, it's not too bad of an idea. It's pretty dastardly. But we are going to take the long route back with all the dead ends around this horrible box maze of sorts. And while we are assaulted with beeps and boops and screeches and danger around every corner, we're going to try our best to negotiate the way we came back, as the shorter distance is usually the one that will get you killed the fastest. Still, though, it seems like I am a bit trapped here. I don't actually know what I'm supposed to do, and yeah, I think I'm fucked. say hello to the only death screen in the game. Considering that there is, I would say, maybe 2 different enemy types in the entire game, that's the only death screen that you will ever be seeing, and if it's your first time playing, you will be seeing it a lot. Especially considering there's no way to skip it. And I decided to leave at least this single death in to show you what I have to deal with every time I die in the game. I have to sit through multiple of these cutscenes that we see multiple times. And we are brought back to the voice recorder. Now, normally this wouldn't be that interesting, but it does have one interesting mechanic behind it. And that's we get to hear Laura's voice.
Voice record number 012, Laura Lewis. Hypersleep was instantaneously interrupted with the activation into emergency mode. I confirmed the existence of a formless, invisible organism which attacked Parker. Afterwards, I identified Parker's corpse in his quarters. His death is now positively confirmed. I contacted Kimberly via videophone, but the voice module wasn't functioning and communication was abruptly cut off. The line seems to have been disconnected due to the instability of the network.
And there you go. Normally, we don't really hear too much of Laura... Wait a minute. Wasn't it 61 before? Yeah, that's the other dastardly thing about the saving mechanic of the game. It takes 3 charges to save, but it also requires 1 battery charge every time you load a save. Every time you die, every time you restart the game, every time you load a save, you lose 1 charge of battery. So if you die too much in this game, you have to start over from the beginning. There's no way to recharge the battery. You are just completely and utterly screwed. But, all that aside, yeah, we don't really hear too much of Laura's voice anywhere in the D series. I think she might talk a little bit near the end of D2. For the most part, though, for being a digital actress, Kenji Eno mostly decided to fall back on just physical actions to show her emotions, and, well, that's very much limiting, I would say, considering that for the most part, she has little to no emotions to show on her rock-solid face. But yeah, now that we are heading back up to the first floor, knowing full well that there is one of those invisible aliens waiting around up here, it's also good to point out that, well, there were big wide open spaces downstairs which allowed us some ability to dodge around the invisible monsters, but in these corridors you have absolutely no room to maneuver about. There's no sidestepping around the aliens in here. Anytime you run into one in one of these halls, it's either fight or flight, and considering right now we have no means to fight, well, we should probably rectify that as quickly as possible, which is why we're going to head over to Marcus's room for no apparent reason. Yeah, as far as I know, by turning on the elevator power and calling Kimberly, it will cause that cinematic to play in front of Marcus's room. And as to why the alien didn't immediately murder us, I don't know, but he was nice enough to bust through the door, allowing us access into Marcus's room. Though as we head in, we see it's just as grisly scene that was waiting for us in Parker's room. Yeah, this is going to become kind of a running theme as we progress through Enemy Zero. Not too many people are going to survive, kind of like in Aliens. But if we investigate Marcus's mutilated body, or some reason or another, Laura decides that 2 of his fingers are better than none and, well, decides to pocket it as an item. Clearly she's disgusted by it, but, well, I'm her god and I force her to do whatever tickles my fancy. And really, it tickles me to no end to know that right now she's just walking around with 2 fingers squishing around in her pockets full of key cards and other useless bric-a-brac. But we didn't pick that up for entirely no reason. There's this single door waiting over here in the corner. And as Laura places her hand upon it, we see that it requires some type of DNA. Now, I suppose we could pick up Marcus's entire body and just kind of rub it up against the keypad, but, well, I guess 2 fingers will have to do in this case. Also, as far as I can remember, Laura ends up keeping pretty much every key item she picks up in the game, and that means from now until the end of the game, we will be carrying around Marcus's 2 dismembered fingers in our pocket. But we don't have too many options in this closet here. We're pretty much immediately thrust to where we need to go. Inside the cabinet here, lo and behold, we finally find our first weapon of the game. Seems like a pretty rockin' laser pistol, if I do say so. But with that in hand, that's all we needed in here. And I think it's time that we finally go face down that invisible alien and try to make our way to the elevator that he is blocking. Now, combat in Enemy Zero is awful, to say the least. Especially considering that the first gun they give us has no charge whatsoever, so we can't even fire it right now. And we need to solve that little quandary before we go face our enemy. And well, hopefully if this was your first time playing, you didn't immediately go rush into battle and find your gun just fizzled out. Pretty dangerous situation, to say the least. Good news is we do know exactly where we need to go to charge up our weapon, and it's right over in the locker room. And I guess it is really good that they did leave behind that database of everything we're going to be interacting with in the game, because otherwise, you might not have even known this was some system to charge up your weapon. And there we go, we now have a fully charged laser pistol. But you may have noticed when I brought it up before, there was not really anything in the way of an ammo counter, and if you're wondering just how many shots your weapon has, well, guessing. That's pretty much what you're left to. You can pretty much expend all these shots in your gun and count them yourself, but there's no in-game HUD to tell you that, and well, hopefully you don't decide to experiment in the midst of battle. The good news is that those charge stations do have an infinite amount of energy, so It's never any problem if you run out of ammo to run back, but, well, it is time-consuming to say the least to see all those cutscenes, but, well, it's time for some actual combat and a quick explanation about the wonderful sound system in the game. Now, there are 3 different levels of beeping and booping to tell you whether or not the enemy is close, and we do get one last warning radar screech before you're going to die. But yeah, I know that was a bit quick, and it's probably for the best, but all enemies in the game die to 1 hit from your laser. Problem is, you have to be point blank to them, and you have to be fully charged. Not overcharged, because if you overcharge your weapon, it will completely dissipate the charge, leaving you high and dry, and ready to be chopped down on by the alien. And yes, it's as difficult and as cumbersome as it looks. And it won't be the last time that we're going to be getting into a firefight. The good news is normally it's only a one-on-one situation, but that rarely ever makes it better. But yeah, let's go ahead and get on the elevator and get out of here. And hooray, we just lost the gun we picked up, and we have an enemy right fucking behind us. Don't go right. Right is instant death. Left, though, is mildly better.
Laura, can you hear me? It's Kimberly. I'm watching you through the surveillance camera. The ceiling duct should be open. Climb through it and get out of there.
Yeah, Kimberly informs us that there's an open air duct up here, and if you're wondering how to look up, it's the C button, even though the game fucking never tells you that. And there's a good reason why the game never tells you that, and that's because this is the only time that mechanic is ever used.
Laura, right now you are in between the 4th and 5th level. I'm on the 5th level. You can get here through the emergency hatch. Watch out, the hatch is located on the other side of the tower.
Yeah, with that, I think this is as good a place as any to stop. Hopefully you'll join me next time if I decide to continue on with this shitty game. See you then.